Hi, my name is Tony Chapman, and I wanted to talk to you about something that happened over the past few weeks. I experienced a death in the family, and a question came up from that. The question really revolved around our last names. You see, my last name is Chapman, Chatman, and yet my cousin who passed away, her last name was Chatmon, Chatmon. And I began to get questions and emails, so what's the proper way to spell it? Well, there's actually a story behind this. I was talking to my father about this, and it turns out that looking at he and his four brothers, he was, as the youngest, the only one born up north. The other four were born down south in South Carolina. And it just so happened that when they were born, being black in the South in the early 1900s, people just didn't care. When I say people, I also include the medical staff and the doctors. And so when their birth certificates were filled out, often they weren't filled out when it happened. And the doctors didn't even take the time to make sure their names were spelled properly. And so my father grew up with four brothers who all had different last names. They were all M-O-N and he was different. His was M-A-N. And here's what's even crazier about it. He didn't even know until after high school, when he enlisted in the Army, that his name was spelled differently. You see, his name was actually spelled the same as his parents. And yet he just assumed he had the same last name as his brothers. Now, you can imagine the mental gymnastics and the emotional obstacles you have to overcome just to deal with that internally. But then he found out, as the Army went through his paperwork, that his last name was actually Chatman. And so he had to change his driver's license. He had to change his social security card. All of these things were wrong because this information was wrong. So when we start talking about words like bias, whether conscious or unconscious, realize they have a huge ripple effect, because now generations will be affected. Entire lineages of family members will be affected because a doctor just didn't think that this type of person was worth giving a second thought, worth checking to make sure that the information was correct, worth giving their best. And before you think this is some crazy anomaly, that this just happened with one person, just so happens the same thing happened on my mom's side of the family. There's actually multiple spellings of my mom's last name. I won't tell you because obviously security reasons, mother maiden name. But there's multiple ways that it's spelled. And in fact, it was so long after she was born that her birth certificate was turned in that it actually had the wrong date and the wrong month. And so when she needed to get a passport, you could imagine the challenges. So now, imagine now, go back to the argument of, well, we need to have better voter ID rights. And do you know there's a lot of people who wouldn't be able to vote just because of this type of negligence? And you can question whether it's intentional or unintentional, but it has consequences. I have family members who to this day can't get married because they can't get an actual birth certificate. Seriously. And so this is what people go through. This is reality. So when you wonder, why do people respond in such strange ways? Why, when Green Book comes out, that people, why is this such an emotional response? Or why when you see a room of 100 people and there's only one or two black people, why do they feel or seem to act a certain way? Maybe there's a history behind it. A history that you don't understand, but you should take the time to get to know. Because it'll give you a more holistic view not only of the country, but a better respect of people and their individuality.